Well, folks, you're just tuning in. We are Apropos and welcome. Not going to read the normal spiel, but you know what we got? We've got three of us on the panel. We got Mike, Ray, and I'm Eric. And we're probably going to do a REPL session today if the REPL gods are on our side, if we please them today. So stay tuned. We're only going to talk for 30 minutes. All right. We have some topics. There's show notes, should be linked in the description. And our main topic of the day, because we haven't broadcast since this was announced. Oh?
Before we get into the main topic, a small housekeeping topic.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Very, very small housekeeping topic, which is that we have a new Twitter handle, which is Apropos CLJ. And we will also tweet the links and all this other stuff via that Twitter thing. So that if people want, we eventually will get back to live broadcasting when we get the tech sorted out. But in the meantime, that's a good place to see what's going on and find out information about when the new videos are uploaded and stuff like that.
Cool. Yeah. The old Twitter account, we can't get it back for some reason, so this is a new Twitter.
That's right, yeah.
Twitter
shat the bed, and they won't respond to us, so what can we do?
Let's put that in the show notes as well, our new Twitter account.
Yeah.
Right, so that was supposed to be before we got to our main topics, and now the main topic.
Right, yes, okay, sorry.
Cognitect has been bought by a Brazilian company that is backed by Chinese investment. So there you go. That's the topic of the day. This is probably old news now. This happened like July 23rd and is now September 3rd or 2nd. September 2nd today. So we've had some time to see, to process it and see, has anything changed? But we should start with, what the news actually is, what actually happened. So Cognitect has been wholly purchased by Nubank. They are owned by Nubank now. And that there's some details we need to talk about because that doesn't mean that Nubank owns Clojure. Clojure has always been copyrighted to Rich Hickey, and so it's still his. But Nubank is now paying the salaries of the people who work there at Cognitect, and that includes Rich and Stu and all the same folks we know. There have been 3 articles posted that have a lot of the good details, this kind of stuff that we would like to know as members of the community. And we'll probably be going through those a lot during this show.
The way I look at it, though, is it's a bit like the kind of the moment when somebody suggested that the Earth rotated around the sun, not the sun rotating around the Earth. It feels a little bit like that, really, because the number of people that were working at Nubank on Clojure and Datomic were 400 or 500 people,
Right.
which is far more than Cognitect ever employed.
That's the weird thing is when I first heard that fact, and this was before that purchase, I was like, why don't we not know this? It's like we're in our galaxy and there's this huger galaxy next to us that we weren't even aware of.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Nubank is pretty active, in terms of being at conferences. They've always got a contingent there with a booth. They are always offering jobs. Now, they do talk about how they weren't as active in open source as they would have liked. So, they weren't dominating all the contributions to the projects like they should. But they're saying it's mostly because like things just work. That's what they said. Um, I don't know how true that is, or whether it's some other, more complicated political thing going on. Um, but yeah, it's a big company, a big closure company. I know it's a very like people have asked me like, oh, I've interviewed there, but they turned me down. Do you have any advice? What can I learn so that I could go back and people are seeking out those jobs. They're in 2019 they moved international, so they've got a branch in Berlin, Buenos Aires, like they're moving all over Mexico City. They're really growing. Um, so one of the things I wanted to talk about was why did this happen? And so from both the buyer and the seller perspective, like why would they be interested in this acquisition? Um, I guess I'll go first. So why Nubank? I think that they recognize just what you said, that like they had a lot invested in Clojure in terms of their software stack, and this was a way of ensuring that that stack would be, just a little like de-risked, right? Like, okay, we'll pay all the salary. We won't um, we won't have to worry that someone else buys them or does something weird, or any other weird thing that could happen to a company and make it not as stable to develop Clojure. From Cognitect's side, I think that they see it as a de-risking in the other way. They don't have to go do the feast or famine cycle of contract work. They can focus on what they want to focus on, which is Clojure and Datomic, their main commercial product. That's my ideas.
Do you think like several Cognitect team members were already consulting with Nubank and they had a presence there, and maybe it's just simple as Nubank said, instead of just contracting, why don't we just buy them?
Yeah.
And they could say, then we kind of like have their attention directly. Well, the CEO kind of mentioned something like that. They wanted more direct access to what Cognitect had to offer. And maybe it was just like, well, buy them.
Right.
What if it's that simple?
I think my view of it is that it was not Clojure. It was partly Clojure, but it was more Datomic, I think, because I will come on to this a bit later, but I think that they probably thought, holy shit, we've got this bank and it's running on top of Datomic. Clojure's viable. It's open source. We see it, in the end, we've got 500 people. If we really want to look after it, we probably could. Or we could hire some people to do that. There are enough people in the community to do that. So I don't think Clojure is the risk, and I don't think that was the issue. Maybe it was an acqui-hire, but I think it was more about the fact that Datomic is a closed source technology. It's not catching fire. They're really using it, but it's clear from everything. Well, it's not clear. We don't know the books, but the fact that they're kind of still penny pinching on the consulting, they're still penny pinching on their investments in tooling around Datomic. They have this Rebel thing, but they don't have a proper console. They don't all the kind of tools that one would imagine that a database vendor would have. They don't have. So my guess is that they're thinking, holy crap, this whole bank is running on top of Datomic, and we need more investment in that specific technology, which we cannot. We can't control it. We have to own the company in order to put money into it. So my guess is that Datomic will be the place where you get the most investment. And again, I can only see that in the sense that this Rebel tool is now free. It used to be behind a page. I mean, it was a bizarre thing. If you think about it, it was behind a Patreon fucking account. I mean, I'm sorry, but you've got the beggar ball out at that point, If that's not a signal that you're hurting, why are you asking for a few dollars for a tool like Rebel? It's very weird. So I think that act alone might have spooked them enough to think, this is not looking good. These guys are, they're running on empty. or they're clunking at a very low run rate,
Sure.
they're able to sustain their lifestyle and make the company go. But you know, and I think the fact that it's closed source was a big risk to them.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think they bought it for that reason. That's
I
my
mean,
viewpoint.
with
That's
the
what
with it
comes out in
being
the press releases as well, really.
yeah, yeah. I mean, with it being closed source and the team, I mean, the Datomic direct developer team is probably pretty small. It's a small bus factor. It's not like something
Yeah,
like, Postgres that has open source. There's lots of people who built on it, um, and a lot of people you could just pay to maintain it. Um,
yeah.
that's a really good point.
I think if you think about the core technology around Datomic is obviously awesome, and it's kind of like it's pretty much there. You don't need to do much with that, but it's all the ecosystem of tools and
Yeah.
stuff like that. Nobody's investing in it because it's closed source. So
Well,
you either have to open source it so you get more people involved,
yeah.
or you buy the company and put more money into it, a la Oracle or something.
Right. I mean, if it comes down to like a cash flow question. If it
Yeah, yeah,
exploded and had 1 million users paying
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah. It's
license
true.
fee, it'd
Yeah,
be like, oh yeah,
yeah,
let's just hire a bunch of developers and we'll
yeah,
build on
yeah,
this thing. And everyone wins, right? All the customers are like, wow, this is great. I'm part of this growing thing. I'm paying a small yearly license and every day I see new features. But if it doesn't do that in a closed source world, if it's just like you're just scraping by and you have to do consulting on the side, then yeah, you're not going to see that explosion. And that seems to be what's this situation they're in. Let's put it that way. So
yeah.
that's
I mean, kudos to them for obviously getting faith in enough important customers and enough important companies that
yeah,
that one of them was willing to put a big chunk of money on the table and take it over. But I always felt this was like their exit strategy essentially, was that that's why they were keeping it closed source, because somebody would buy them out,
uh,
either another software vendor or a big customer. But I really didn't see a big customer doing it. But the problem, I mean, the more generic point these days is that banks are really software houses.
yeah,
So, you know, and, and I think that's quite an interesting evolution.
yeah. And I'm wondering if other big closure companies are kind of regretting, like, oh man, we could have done that. We never thought of it. Um, I mean, if you look at the size of their data set, I mean, I don't know the specifics, but if you look at the number of customers they have and uh, the number of daily transactions, and then the stuff that they talk about in their conference talks, like they have a huge Datomic database. They're probably paying a lot in license fees and consulting just to keep the scalability up, in terms of like the number of transactors that are running.
I
And
still don't think there was any way that those license fees would justify buying the company in any possible sense. If you thought that company was viable and had lots and lots of different customers, so I don't
I'm
see
not,
the
well, I'm
actual.
not, no, I'm not justifying that that they looked at it and it's like, well, if we just doubled it, our yearly spend, then it'll justify buying the company. I'm not saying that. I'm
Right.
saying that with all the consulting that they're doing, the fact that this is a small, 30-person company, like
Yeah.
versus a 500-person company, that just having that control, like, oh, if we need to grow this, they can't grow fast. They can't double their team size because
Yeah.
once the contract is over, they're going to need to fire all these people. And so they
Yeah.
want to be able to, you know, tie their mass together or whatever you call that and, you know, move at the same speed.
Yeah. I think they were basically absorbed because they had to be.
Yeah.
Because it comes back to this, heliographic view of the world. It has to be, you have to, that, there's, as Mike said, there's a big planet, a big galaxy out there. And it's just the force of gravity is eventually going to pull it in.
Yeah,
But I
and
mean, New Bank have got two choices, yeah, in my opinion. Their first choice, well, they've got many choices. One choice is to say, fuck it, let's just go and buy and use a different database. Let's just let's just use a different database. We'll go Postgres or, DynamoDB or wherever it's going to be. Whatever. I mean, it's a bank, so they're probably not going to go with the cloud. This is the other risk, I think, with Datomic going all on the cloud and not its on-premise thing not getting fed very well. So, they're seeing that change of emphasis by the company.
Right.
So there are some little tweaks like this, which I think are probably worrying the bank. But in the end, I think they're just looking at that and saying, we need to control it. It's just too much of a risk for us because we've got so much sunk cost in Datomic that if we want to change it, it's going to cost us. That's the calculation they do, I think, is how much would it cost us to buy that company versus to change Datomic?
For sure.
I think that's the calculation.
That's a huge one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, how much
there's a big upside. There's a big upside to buying Cognitect as well because of all these benefits. So it's definitely not just a zero sum game where
de-risking. It's
not just
It's an improvement as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They get that thing safe, but they also then get this boost.
Well, do you think Datomic might be open sourced?
I don't know. No idea.
Yeah, me either.
No.
Yeah, probably not.
I think the motivation to keep it closed source is gone. That's for sure.
Right.
There's no longer any motivation because they've got enough money now. So I don't think there's like. I think the new bank making money out of Datomic is going to be, trivial. I don't think it will it won't make any, it won't, how do you say this? It won't kind of be a rounding error in their bottom line, So it's not like they're going to get a chunk of cash out of the license fees from Datomic. So I think the concept of open sourcing it probably will be on the table, but there are probably all kinds of, complexities around doing that. That I don't understand really, but
I think for closure, this is a positive thing. Most languages eventually they either start at a big company or get sponsorship from a big company. Similar to how Google hired Guido for a while, for a long time, for Python.
And Heroku hired Mats. Yeah.
Oh, did they? Okay. Didn't know that. Yeah. Just your company's built on this language. Just pay the guy a full-time salary to work on it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's cheaper than like trying to get your current employees to like contribute the stuff you want to happen in the language. Just let him code on it without worrying about his retirement.
Yeah, for sure. And I think yeah, I think so. I think it's going to be good for closure as well. Yeah. But the funny thing is, they're very what should we say? They're very assiduous about making it clear that it won't affect closure. Actually, that Rich is still the king of closure. And that, by the way, to me, I know we're kind of getting a little bit out of the window, a little bit off the topic here, but at some point we're going to come back to this. That a good person in charge of our language should be planning for their succession. And I really think it's about time after this purchase and after things are settled down financially that he starts to think about this succession planning. And how do you open up the possibility of letting other people have good ideas around closure and taking a more kind of not exactly a central role, but a bit more of a kind of
That's really
influential
interesting. I
role.
would say it's. I mean, I don't know if it's a good idea or not. I've never run a big open source project, but I would say that this opens the door for him not having, um, languages like Python and stuff. They grow so big, and there's so many companies dependent on it that they kind of they force the BDFL, the benevolent dictator for life, to open up this kind of community process, right? So that it's not just relying on him anymore or her. And what I think this is doing is like basically saying, well, I can still do whatever I want. I don't have to open up this community process because I am backed by this big company. So
Yeah, but the way I think about this is that we might talk about this in a minute, but everyone's got ideas about how Clojure could get better. Yeah,
yeah,
and it always comes down to, well, there's only so much engineering resources, there's only so much bandwidth. No, now that argument is out the window. Yes, there is only so much ever any bandwidth, but you can't argue that anymore. You can't say, okay, well, if I've got, like, as an example, yeah, there was a notion about doing this thing, and Stuart said it on our show, actually, Stuart Holloway. He said that we could have a kind of instrumented version of Clojure and a production version of Clojure.
right,
But, where are we going to get the engineering time to do that?
right.
Well, you've just bought yourself a lot of time, so get a clever guy and do it, because that doesn't change anything in the language. You don't have, Rich Hickey
No,
doesn't
you just have
to do
a
that.
version that doesn't have, like, a production version could get rid of all the doc strings and function metadata and stuff, and that would improve boot time. And the dev version could have even more documentation.
Well, and more diagnostic and more debugging
diagnostic,
and more options for like tracing things and
Yeah.
all these kind of things that they're kind of reluctant to do now for performance reasons.
I mean, I think,
And also because it's an engineering overhead and cost to do it.
right. And, so Stu has his post on it, on the kind of thoughts that he's got, like, it explains a lot of the motivation that they had. And one of the things that he's talking about is how they're going to expand the team behind Clojure, independent of Datomic, offer more conferences, training, and resources of every kind. Leaves it open to the imagination. But that's good. I know Cognitect, like, they've never sold out a conference, right? So there has not been. It's expensive to run a conference like they run it, and so this is a good thing that there's money to spend on these conferences because they're not a money making thing, and then improve diversity. That's a good thing, but I don't know what that has to do with the development of the Clojure language.
A lot of the actual facts that they have in those releases, the news releases, don't really speak to Datomic so much, right? You must have to read between the lines to come to that conclusion. Is that true? I mean, a lot of it.
Are you talking about Stu's post?
Yeah, a lot of those things, they don't really speak to, like, the Ray theory that he just proposed, and elaborated upon.
So the one
one example here is Cognitect will continue to offer professional services for Datomic customers, but will transition out of general consulting development.
Okay, so they mentioned Datomic there. Yeah.
Edward Wibble, he's the CTO of Nubank. It seems like he's the one who made the decision to buy. Yeah.
Okay.
So they have 2,300 Datomic database.
Okay.
A lot. That's 10 per Cognitect employee. I know he kind of opened the kimono a little bit about all. Um, I'm trying to find the things that I was looking at. Y'all can keep talking. I'll keep looking.
You're trying to find the references to
Yeah,
Detroit.
yeah.
Well, I mean, Mike, I think people aren't going to say this kind of stuff anyway,
Right, yeah,
so
yeah.
inevitably,
You have to read between
I'm
the
doing
lines.
I'm doing a bit of punditry here. I mean, I could be
Yeah.
completely wrong. I totally accept that. But I think the logic of what I say is correct, even if it doesn't align with the reality.
Well, it's a theory that holds water though. Like you have to ask, like, why did this happen? Yeah. And it's certainly
It,
not.
it, it, it makes no sense purely from a closure perspective because they didn't buy
They
closure,
didn't buy
and
closure. Yeah.
Right.
so it doesn't make any sense. And they're shutting down the closure consulting.
Yeah, they didn't buy it for
So
that either. Yeah.
they definitely didn't buy it for any of their consulting things. They bought it for Datomic. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I mean, the exact rationale,
Mm-hmm.
who knows? It's
Okay.
probably a whole bunch of different things, but fundamentally, their calculation has to have been if this company goes under or this database doesn't catch fire, we are fucked.
So,
So how much how much do we spend to get unfucked? So we either buy that company or we change databases. And they're a rapidly growing company. To change their technical infrastructure midway through that would be a horror show. Potentially let competitors in, all these kind of things. So, and like Eric says, they've got a lot of Chinese money, they've got a lot of Brazilian money, but so they've got a lot of money, and I think sometimes
this is
putting
what
money.
the money is for, right? You
Exactly.
can't do this with cash flow. You have to do this with a big chunk, and that's why you go and you get investment thing.
But I mean, I think to your point, I mean, I think it's generally going to be good for Clojure and Datomic. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Having that team well funded and well kept. I mean, what they choose to do with it is, of course, entirely up to them. Who knows? And certainly nothing significant has happened. But it's early days. It's only a month. I mean, we think we're making a lukewarm take, but really, it's kind of hot, really.
It's just the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just started. Yeah. I mean,
Right. I mean, also, a month is like just barely enough time for everyone to like send their voided checks to get their direct deposits set up and stuff like that with their new payroll provider. Like it's not much time at all in terms of a big company's scale.
Yeah, and you've got to spend a bit of time shopping for that, Harley Davidson or whatever. Whatever midlife crisis toy they go for.
They had an exit. Yeah, take some money off the table. Yeah, that's nice. I'm happy.
But yeah, I'm very happy for them, and I think it's definitely going to be good for the community in general.
Definitely,
it's got the possibility of being very good. I think I think it takes a lot of constraints off those guys and a lot of weight off those guys. So we'll see how it works out. But none of the stuff that they're doing is very easy, and it doesn't. The actual work itself, to some extent, is not fed by money. It's fed by intellect. It's fed by ideas, and those things are still in scarce supply. So,
well, I'm looking at stuff like the kinds of resources that could be put into documentation and guides and the stuff that has been happening, but it's just slow. And just feeding that. I mean, it's not money per se, but it's attention that comes away, from actual Clojure development, right? And if Nubank could have some kind of like summer of code project where they pay people during the summer to work on stuff, like all that stuff will add up. It'll make things better.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think the documentation and the guides need a lot of improvement, and they could suddenly get a big injection of bandwidth, that's for sure.
Time will tell. Huh?
Yeah, I think the core isn't going to change very much, though. I think that's going to take, I think that's just their, they've kind of, like you say, they're settling down after a month of, getting a new payroll organized and stuff like that.
Yeah, and probably winding down contracts like that will take some time.
Yeah,
If they've
yeah,
got
yeah.
a year-long contract with some company, they're not going to just stop.
Right. Yeah.
But they probably won't renew. But that, those developers are still dedicated to that until it's over.
Yeah, and they've also got to work out what to do with their people. They've got consultants.
Yeah, subcontractors and stuff. Yeah.
The subcontractors is probably, they finish at the end of their contract and off they go. But if you've got contractors, I think Karen is a consultant there. I think there are various other people that are well known in the community that are consultants there. Now, I think those people would get jobs without a doubt, any of them. But they might redeploy them somewhere else.
Yeah, I think they would either go on to pure Datomic projects or move into core Datomic development or core Clojure development. Seems like
yeah. That would
I
also
think
be quite exciting, I think, if those people were unleashed on that.
Yeah, that all of this is what we've been talking about, right? Like that you're trying to support a product, Datomic, with consulting, and now they don't have to do that. So it's freeing. You can work more on the product. Yeah,
they definitely got a lot of talent there. Yeah. Yeah, it would be interesting.
Yeah. So I run my own business and I feel this all the time that, I'm all the Clojure materials I sell, the Clojure training stuff, the courses, it's not taking off, right? It's not like this super lucrative, product that I've got. And so I often do have to supplement it with some consulting or training or something. And it definitely feels terrible. I can tell that it's bad for both parties to be pulled in two directions, trying to push the rock uphill and also having to work a side job so that I can keep the rock from rolling back down the hill. And if it were somehow taking off, then I wouldn't have to do the consulting and I could push it faster and it would be all great. But it hasn't been that way, and I can see with Datomic that they're probably in the same situation. We'd love to work on Datomic more, but we have to pay the bills and we have to help someone else get Datomic working. And instead of fixing Datomic and making it better, we have to help someone keep theirs up and running and get their software running on our product that we know would be better if we had more time to work on it. So that's unfortunate. And now they're free of that. They don't have to worry about that anymore.
Yeah, I don't know the internals of Datomic at all, but I know, for instance, that if you make a Datomic query, the top tips are things like, make sure it's a bit like a SQL databases from the 1980s or early 1990s. Pre-optimizer. Okay. Put the biggest relation of where you're going to
selective one.
The most selective one at the beginning. Yeah. And they have that in their top tips,
Yeah.
So they have no optimizer. They have nothing in the background that will help. And all of these kind of things about backup, recovery, operational, blah, 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 blah. All these things that could really make the whole thing more reliable and transparent and straightforward to work with. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they've got lots of ideas on the table about how to move this forward and make it faster and more scalable and blah blah blah. But like you say, they're just strapped in terms of like engineering resources.
Right. I mean, it's one of those things where if you could work on it continuously, get into the zone, you could finish it. You could just do it. You could make it really cool. You know how to do it. They're smart. They've got great ideas and they've got the skills. But every time you start working on that and you run out of money, you got to go stop.
Yeah.
And then when you come back, you got to figure out where you were. And it really slows things down in like an exponential way. It's like cash misses,
Yeah, quite literally.
Yeah, I mean, that happens to me in courses where it's
I mean, you're missing the cash.
Yeah, if I
I've had a cash hit.
if I just stay up late and finish the course tonight, it's all in my head. It'll take like 6 to 8 hours, right? But if I have to spread that out over time, over days, it takes weeks. It's like it's only 8 hours of work if I just do it all while it's in my.
Yeah.
But if I have to like pick it up and like where was I and like it just takes way more time.
One final bit of speculation actually about Datomic is with a Datomic cloud. If Nubank are running on premise and Datomic cloud is bringing no money in or a fairly small amount of money in, and it's a big distraction in terms of engineering and effort and all that kind of stuff. One wonders whether that would actually going to survive.
That is a weird thing that I was thinking about, just as like an alignment of incentives. Like, what incentives does Nubank really have for the commercial success of Datomic? In ways where they're not using it, like you were saying, it's an interesting problem that is this like Google Reader? It's like, oh, is the biggest RSS reader in the world, but it's like a pimple on the butt of Google's source code. And so like they don't care if they just shut it down, even though like hundreds of millions of people will be affected by it. I mean, it's a different scale, obviously, but like part of the sort of virtuous cycle of product development is you find veins of growth, veins of expensive problems that people have that you can like say, oh, we're building out this feature because it's solving a lot of people's problems. And it turns out now more people want it because it solves this problem for more people. And so then more people join and they have new problems and you can solve those. If it's simply like we're just keeping it running and there's no incentive. I guess there's like you're not going to die, so like why fight for survival, right? And I just hope that it doesn't fall into something like that.
Yeah, but I mean, I think we've spoken about Atomic Cloud in the past, and I mean, I've used it, and it's a nice product. It does work, but again, it's one of these things where getting it set up and all the scripting and it's kind of it's not well documented, and the CloudFormation scripts are all very manual, and it's kind of weird actually in some ways. The onboarding experience for that database is very odd, and quite manual, and so it's an unfinished. Even in the current state, it's quite unfinished, and then you have this other problem where. You look at the actual architecture of the thing. It's quite impressive, yeah.
Hmm.
But to me, it's a kind of, and I don't say this really very lightly, but it's a kind of antithesis of the closure thought process. It's way too complicated. There's a lot of accidental complexity in it. There's all kinds of things combined and coupled, and I think it's a real mess actually. From an architecture perspective, it's not a nice. I mean, to me, the beginning of Datomic, where you had the brain in the client and the server out there doing the index. I mean, this is a really nice. This is a really really perfect idea. I think this Datomic Cloud seems like a total fuck up. I mean, I'm sorry. I've used it, and as a product user, it's kind of janky, but it does work. But I mean, it's like got this web server and everything built into it. It's like a deployment platform for web applications. Who's going to do that, really? I mean, it's like I don't know. It's like, yeah, what problem is it really solving? Except one they've invented, I think. I just don't think it's answering a lot of people's questions about how am I going to use data log, So that's my perspective anyway, and I'm a bit of a polemicist, I suppose. But I'm not a great fan of their architecture. I think it's way overcooked, and like I say, it seems like it's the antithesis of what I would expect from a closure database. Oh, he's
Had to run.
yeah. What do you think, Mike?
Well, so the incentives have changed now, right? So I guess that's what we'll probably see play out. I mean, it remains to be seen, is Datomic really a product anymore? Or is it just now owned by a company that's maintaining it and keeping things going? And
I think it will be a product still, I'm sure of that. It's just a question of what form will it take,
yeah, what are the incentives
Will
behind it?
will they decide to strip out certain clients or certain use cases or whatever? I think it's going to be very interesting,
I mean,
in a year's time when we look back on it, what will have changed,
Right, yeah. That's probably what it's going to take, is about a year to see.
is it possible that with good financial support, Datomic will find an audience? Like,
Yeah,
I mean, a database is not an easy thing to bootstrap. It's amazing that Clojure has been able to bootstrap as far as it has. I think being open source helped, but a database, I mean, especially database as a product, as a service, that's like, if you're trying to find basically new businesses that are starting that have those needs, that when they're making their initial architecture decisions, like, have this need for an immutability and all the stuff that Datomic gives you, the interesting distributed properties, and I mean, it's a small audience, really. It's not something that is going to be like, it's going to take off. And like I said, I think the fact that it's not open source, especially at first, really stymies it. Especially with microservices growing, and the way the licensing was at first, like, it was per JVM. And so you're looking at microservices, you want a peer per microservice. That's a lot of money. You got, you microservice architecture, you want hundreds of them. And
yeah, well, they changed that, which is
yeah,
sensible. But yeah, but again, that to me was like it's always an interesting question. Was that an architectural change that they made for financial reasons, or was it because they really liked this REST API and they didn't like this original peer concept? Because that was quite a U-turn in some ways,
Yeah.
Now you don't have the client with all the intelligence in the client node anymore. No, you're just doing everything that they said was wrong, which is going to the center.
Well, it's kind of the opposite. It's move your application into the database. right?
Yeah, which
Send
is the
your
kind of opposite of the original pitch, you know?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of the same thing, but turned inside out. But yeah,
Yeah, but it's the wrong way around, I think.
but so I can imagine that one of the bottlenecks, the growth, is that it takes a lot to sell it, and you have
Yeah,
to
good point.
teach people how to use it.
Mhm.
How are they going to use it if it's not open source? They're not going to play with it as much.
Right.
They're not going to look for interesting, cool new ways to use it. One of the main ways that it was publicized at first was basically Rich Hickey giving conference talks all over. I mean, I remember when Datomic launched, it was like every week there were 2 or 3 new conferences he was speaking at. And I think that's tiring for him, but
Yeah.
and it takes away from development time. You can't code and go to conferences and develop talks and stuff. And um, this kind of support might be able to like get that buzz wheel going again. Um,
Well, I think certainly if
yeah.
they did open source it, if that was on the table, and let's say by the end of the year, where are we now? September, maybe it's end of the year, Q1 next year, they open source it because they see this as a way of like reigniting the interest in it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then that could be good because in the end, what New Bank really want is more people using the Atomic. You know,
Yeah.
I think there's no doubt about that, and that's what every kind of software owner wants is they want more people using their stuff. You know, because then they're not the only one um, that can use this thing, and they're learning from other people. They're not in a cul-de-sac. You know,
And then there's Juxt hanging out on the
I
side
don't
too.
think people. Sorry.
There's Juxt hanging out on the side there too. As a
Yeah,
side
yeah.
story to this whole thing. Yeah. Like if you were saying, I want to try to use a database, you might simply pick Juxt just because you can get at it without having to pay, right?
The crux.
I'm sorry, yeah. I
Mm.
got the names mixed up. Yeah. You know what I meant? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, I'm not, I don't know the open source business models or
Right.
the database business models. But it seems like if more people were using it, there would be more room for consulting.
Yeah.
Although it seems like that's off the table now. That's not that important. So it's weird, right? Because if you had something like an Oracle model,
No, but they
which
do say
is
they have the atomic consulting. That's still on the
they
table.
will, it's on the table, but it's not like this is how it's going to make money
No, that's true.
anymore,
That's true.
right?
Yeah.
So like before the business model seemed to be it's closed source, and so people are going to come to us. They have to come. They're going to pay a license fee, and if they get stuck, they have to come to us. And there's just not that many people who are going to know how to use it, as opposed to the millions of Postgres consultants, or MySQL consultants.
Yeah.
But if you open source it, more people are going to use it. But then maybe you won't be able. It'll be a more competitive market to sell your consulting.
Yeah, but like you say, you don't worry about the consulting anymore. You're
Right.
just
And so
selling.
now it's
Yeah.
weird. Like, what is the model? Why are you even consulting anymore? It seems like a lack of like a focus at that point.
Well, I think if you focus on the atomic and you open source it, then and you do consulting for it, then the bank essentially has. I mean, you could call it a side hustle, but you could also say, well, okay, interesting question actually is why does a bank use it, and why might a bank not use it? You know. I think some banks, they bought it they wanted it because they were a startup and they wanted some like acceleration in their
Yeah.
technology stack, which makes total sense. But some other banks might not be prepared to take that risk to get that acceleration. They want their open source thing. They want some
Mm-hmm.
support. They want some consulting. They want better documentation. And now you could say, "Oh, well, why
And do
would
they want to
Nubank?"
pay a bank
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
to
Why would they
a
pay another bank to
competitor
do it?
bank
Yeah,
to
yeah.
consult with? Yeah, it's crazy.
Well, maybe it's Walmart would, or some other big corporation isn't a bank, so maybe they would look to fund, get some of their money back via. Yeah, how would they get their money back? Through support licenses, I guess, but that's
Yeah,
about it.
it's weird. It's not a main source of revenue for Nubank,
No.
and um, I I I I don't understand it, and it's
But I
hard
tell
for
you
me
what,
to imagine like it being more than just like, well, we said we were gonna do this, so let's continue doing it because we don't want to spoil the datomic market. So let's just provide this little service on the side, you know.
one of the things that like these big tech companies like Facebook and Google and companies like that is, they selectively open source their technologies. And the interesting question is, why do they do that?
Hmm.
Why did Facebook, for instance, eventually open source React? Because it
Hmm.
was inside of their company before,
Right.
but they decided to open source it. So the question is, why do they bother? Because they're not making any money out of React. So why do they open source React?
Well, that's one of the reasons they do it. It's not something that they want to. Um,
Find a profit
I
from.
mean, for instance, when they open source their whole cloud infrastructure, they're basically saying we are not a cloud. We're not going to compete with AWS or Google Cloud Services or Azure
Mm.
directly by trying to, steal customers from them. We're going to steal customers from them by making all of our stuff open source. So now you can build your own cloud using all this stuff we've made for free, and you don't have to pay Google. You don't have to pay Amazon. Um, I think with React, it was sort of like no um, no developers are going to use this if it's not open source, right?
But
That
but 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 more the question is, why does that matter?
Why do they want developers to use it?
And that's the same
That's
and,
a
and
good
the
question.
same question will be asked of Datomic. And the reason for that is that, and the reason for most of the reasons why these people open source things is because they don't want to have to train all the developers themselves. They don't want to have
Mm,
to rely on only their
mm,
own ecosystem to grow developers in their particular technology. In fact, it's a burden to do that. And it,
yeah.
also, you don't get any new ideas, don't get any feedback, there's no PRs, all the kind of things that, to some extent, Rich kind of like repels,
Hmm.
but he might do the same thing for Datomic, who knows? But, you know, um, if there are good ideas or good developers out there who want to like contribute,
Yeah.
then they can. But at the moment, they can't. And that's why React was open sourced, because they want it to succeed for sure, but they also want to be able to have to not have to only be fed by themselves,
Right. I mean, that's similar to Clojure. If you look at the people on the Cognitect team page, like a lot of
Mm.
them started off as contributors,
Yeah, for
just
sure.
like
Yeah,
open
yeah,
source, like, oh, here I'm fixing this bug, and and
yeah.
and now they're there. They're paid by Cognitect.
Yeah. Hmm.
You know, they're picked up.
Yeah,
Likewise with people who work on the React team, or just big open source contributors.
yeah, definitely.
And yeah, uh,
Why do these
yeah,
companies do this
it.
stuff?
What's that?
Why do these companies do these things? I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
Facebook may just put the stuff out there just because maybe there's a lot of developers within Facebook that feel like that's the direction they want to go, or it's like this kind of makes for a larger footprint of what Facebook is, and it helps attract developers to come their way. Like all
hmm
types of complex reasons for why they would do something like that. But yeah, it's
right.
clearly not to make money off the thing. Yeah.
Right,
Well,
but I think that there's
remember the controversy around the React licensing?
yeah.
Yeah.
You can't sue Facebook if you use React, something
Yeah.
like that.
Right.
They got rid of that. But like
Yeah,
I think that there is some um purely altruistic elements in the companies
Yeah.
who are just like, look, we use a lot of open source stuff.
Hmm.
There's other stuff that we've opened, like they open source Cassandra and their whole stack. And they're like, we're
culture, and there's a lot of
yes, it's
momentum,
part of the culture. It's
which is
just a
not true at
norm.
Apple, right? Apple's a completely different company.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And
but didn't they open source Swift recently?
Maybe,
oh,
yeah.
did they?
Maybe there's a bit of that culture within Apple too.
Well, not recently. Swift is an open source compiler
Yeah.
from the very beginning.
Apple's
It's
been
different,
burned
right?
by open source a lot.
Yeah.
Their browser, I think, is based on an open source stuff. Their
Yep.
operating system is based
WebKit.
on Darwin.
WebKit was like the
Mhm.
what was it called? The browser. Um,
Oh, that old one. Yeah.
it was one of those like GNOME competitor browsers,
Yeah.
and they
Like
they
Concra or something.
yeah, something like that. And they picked it up. Yeah, KDE is the
KDE,
KDE browser. Was it called Conqueror? Maybe it was. And but then the problem was Google started using it for Chrome, and Google just had way more developers working on it than they did, and was dominating the contributions, and they eventually split up. And I think Apple just doesn't they don't want open source to be like a big part of their thing.
It's just a different culture.
I think it's debatable, that one. Like I say, I think there's still something in they're still WebKit is still open source. I think
Yeah.
it was not Apple's decision to make the split. It was Google's, in fact. So they forked it, not Apple. I think you have to be a bit careful the way you explain these things. I know that people, I think that Apple don't come from an open background for sure.
Yeah.
But if you look at what they're doing now, there's a lot of stuff that is open source recently. So they're definitely
Yeah.
they're getting it. I mean, I think it's like you were both saying that a lot of the engineers working in these companies nowadays want to work on open source.
Right.
Like a lot of this AI stuff is being open sourced for that very reason as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think all the Apple AI stuff is open sourced.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying that. We've gone ridiculously long on this topic, by the way.
But you can look at the rationale why the AI stuff is open sourced, because they can't get good developers because developers want
point. Yeah,
exactly.
Back to the other point. Yeah.
The developers want to publish. I mean, AI researchers at least, they want to publish, and that's how they maintain their careers. And so you can't work at Apple because they didn't want to let you publish, whereas other companies would. So likewise with open source, they want to work on something that will benefit more people. We have gone long, haven't we? I don't think we have time for a REPL session.
We should probably call it a day.
Unfortunately.
But can't we just show it at least?
We've vented all of our datomic.
Can't we just show this like?
Okay,
REPL
let's show
we're
it.
starting
let's
again.
Show it.
Okay.
It's a cool thing.
Let me share screen.
It might have crashed in the background actually for a while.
Let's see. So can I share the app? I'm going to try to share Safari. Now I am sharing Safari. I don't know how to tell if it's being shared. I don't know if you guys can see anything.
I can see something. Yeah.
Oh, it's there. I see it.
Oh, okay. So you see it. So we're sharing this then.
Yeah.
Maybe it's
so
still
this. If y'all
can we just start it again? By the way, in real time.
Yeah. Let me stop it. Let's see.
Ray developed this really cool collaborative REPL in a web page kind of system, and we haven't been doing REPL for a while, so we haven't shown it. but he got it working again. Now it's a different incarnation of it. And so we're going to try it one more time.
I can't connect to it though.
No, I know, but that's because I'm restarting it in the background.
Okay.
Don't worry.
It'll start.
I'll tell you when it's ready. Okay.
It's a connected REPL.
Real time.
But it should be now, actually.
It'll say like handshake.
Ooh, handshake. I got a handshake. Let's do it. In the time of COVID, we shouldn't be doing handshakes.
That's true. Let's see, I'm going to share Safari again. Okay. I'm going to evaluate 1. I'm going to evaluate that. Yes, it can count to 1.
Okay, mine is not connecting.
Restart it. Start from scratch.
Again. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, come on. Told you it's very rough, you know.
Very rough.
Yeah, incredibly rough. And, you know, it's completely wrong, but, you know, some parts of it do work.
It's a REPL. What can you say? It's pretty damn cool. All right. It's working for me.
Well, I think in the sense that there's two out of 3 working, I mean, you know, you've got to say it's a quorum.
That's true.
Come on, Eric. You've got to kill the fig wheel session and you'll be back in.
Again? Okay, this is the 3rd time. I'll try it again.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Can I define a var?
You have to be brutal.
So I have mutated the world inside the REPL by defining a var.
And the nice thing is that, you know, now I can reference it over here. You can say X. I can't type, but if I could, I would.
Oh, I see you typing in the little window up there. That's cool. Inc of X. Yeah.
It's back to the way we had it before. It's not letting you in. Yeah, it stops at 2.
The license is up to 2, and then you need to go speak to the Datomic people. Yeah.
I'm getting the handshake, but it's not. Wait, let me try something else. Aha! I was doing the wrong thing. I was hitting enter instead of clicking the button.
Yeah, okay. You got to click the button. Yeah, I haven't got. Oh, come on, all the shortcuts, mate. Yeah.
Yeah, enter. Shortcut. Okay, there we go. I put something in there. You know what would be cool is if you could put the name of the person who typed it.
Yeah, that would be
output.
Yeah, that would be okay. That would be. Yeah. So the idea is that over the coming shows we will get feedback from you guys, and then we'll get. I think this the way the tech's working now. It makes this quite viable. I think it's quite nice. You know, it was a problem before, if I remember rightly. You know, like sharing the screens and this kind of stuff. But this Blue Jeans, the way it's sharing the screen, we can all see it. We can all see each other typing in real time as well. I think it's okay.
Yeah. Before we were using screen, right? We would all.
Yeah. Or Tmux or whatever.
Yeah, Tmux. We Tmux into the same REPL.
Technology from the 60s or whatever.
Hey, it still works.
70s, yeah. Hey.
Well, this is technology from the 50s, so.
Okay, 50s, yeah.
All right, folks. I think we should wrap it up.
Yeah.
Remember, we have a new Twitter handle. What is it again? Apropos-CLJ?
Just see Apropos CLJ. I don't actually know. I think it's Apropos CLJ, but
Apropos CLJ.
I don't think
it'll be in the show notes.
Yes.
Show notes are in the description. Hit us up, comment, please subscribe, because we don't know, because they're not live, we can't notify you, so you can watch it while we record. But we're trying to figure something out for that. And so right now you'll just get an old video. It won't be live. It'll be dead.
Yeah. We should stay on now. I've got some ideas for you, by the way. So let's stay on after the recording is
Okay.
done.
All right. Well, it's done. We're done.